Hey, everybody, it's Alze Calhoun with Coveted Consultant, and I'm here with a special guest. I'm here with Jackie DeMonis, who runs a group on LinkedIn that's all about TED, T-E-D, if you know what that is. We're going to have her explain that in just a minute. But she is not only does she run the group, but she's also a freelance consultant herself in the marketing and advertising world. So she understands what it means to be a consultant. She also understands thought leadership. She does it in her own business, and she does it with this group. So first of all, I want to welcome Jackie. So Jackie, welcome to the call today.
Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. And so why don't we just begin at the beginning, which is why did you start the group? And
sure.
Just why you started.
Yeah. So I actually started the group back in, it was either June or July of 2007, and the reason I started it was because I was on a number of different social platforms, including obviously LinkedIn, but Facebook, Twitter, probably, I don't remember if MySpace was there at that point or not, or if it had already been dismantled for the most part. But ultimately what I was finding is that when I was on these different social platforms and following the TED brand, there was a little difficulty in having actually kind of really like long-term and thoughtful conversations. And a lot of times, with different channels, you get people trolling the sites, looking to start fights and everything. Not that doesn't particularly happen on LinkedIn either. But I think that LinkedIn specifically kind of sets the stage for a little bit more of an intelligent discourse. And then because I was following TED on these other social channels, I actually, and I'm an avid LinkedIn participant, I went to LinkedIn to see if there was actually a TED group on the platform, and there wasn't, and so it really was that simple. I just started it. I was like, I want to connect with other people that are interested in TED ideas or spreading and what they're doing, and I thought it was fascinating. And I think it was actually right around the time that LinkedIn groups actually started, so it was kind of just the luck of the draw, really ultimately being the first one that really did it, and scaled quickly, and people joined. Like, there was no marketing components to it, and that brings us now today to, I think the group's near 450,000 members, and going strong. It has one of the highest engagement rates I actually think it has the highest engagement rate of the mega groups. I couldn't speak for all the other groups though.
So for those who may not be familiar with TED, just tell us what TED is, what it's about, and what you find interesting about it.
Sure. TED Ideas Worth Spreading is ultimately they're really kind of a think tank conference organization where they bring together thought leaders in a multitude of different disciplines, from the arts, technology, design. You really can, I can't even, it's very hard for me to even come across somebody that's not familiar with TED Talks, but, if there's a topic you're interested on and somebody that you're curious that's a leader in their space to hear about, likely there's either a TED Talk or a TEDx talk of some sort of them actually kind of articulating whatever that is. And it's really engaging because the format that they actually have for their talks is really kind of drilled down and really to the basics of just somebody potentially with some sort of, maybe there's a video, maybe there's a PowerPoint behind them, but it's really those speakers that really kind of compel you in such an engaging manner that I think has really captured the interest and intrigue of everybody that's, I like to call people TEDsters, that they're really just engaged in the community as a whole, whether it be on LinkedIn or other platforms.
So the tagline for TED is ideas worth spreading. So are there some, at least for you personally, what are some of the ideas worth spreading for you in your work?
Well, I guess I kind of would probably transition that more in regards to the ideas worth spreading that I perceive within the confines of the group itself. And when it comes to the group itself, I try not to particularly dictate that I know everything and I'm, all knowledgeable about all topics. But the way I kind of see it is that the LinkedIn group is, in my view, kind of TEDx Internet. Or TEDx LinkedIn. This is a self-organized TED group based on LinkedIn. But ultimately, I don't like to think about it that, the way I like to think about it is that everybody has different types of ideas that they deem worth spreading. And I think it ultimately comes down to putting it out into the group, and certain things will gravitate and really get a lot of traction, and other things won't. And so, as long as people stay within the posting guidelines, generally, I'm really open to people opening up discussions on a whole slew of different topics. Excuse me.
So, and this is probably a softball, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. So,
no, go for it.
What makes the TED community as you see it? I'm talking about your LinkedIn community. What makes that community special and worth engaging in?
Oh, they're passionate, that's for sure. I'd say that's probably one of the things that makes it from what I've seen, probably one of the most special groups that I've come across, and most passionate users. I think people go into these conversations with other individuals, whether they're down the street or across the globe, and people. The thing that I found most interesting is that because the group is housed on LinkedIn, and people's profiles are supported by ultimately their resumes and references and their network. I think that people tend to have just really kind of for the most part, higher level and more engaging kind of conversations. And the thing is, you can understand when you're actually engaging in these conversations with people, the background that they bring to the table. And that background really ultimately kind of dictates whether, to what degree you take this person as an expert or, take their opinion from whatever that they're actually saying. And because of the nature of what TED is, and then the nature of the internet and LinkedIn, it's really kind of created really this interesting dynamic of intelligent people that can disagree wholeheartedly on a whole slew of different topics, but still open themselves up to having engaging discussions with people across the globe and ultimately, hopefully, learn new things. I think ultimately that's really what TED as a whole is also about. It's about learning new things. It's about educating yourself. I consider myself an information junkie, and I don't think I can get enough of the different feeds that I have going into my RSS feed. So ultimately, it's whether it's through a more passive method of just actually reading content. Maybe you're and maybe you're maybe you do comment on things. The thing is, the LinkedIn group is very much kind of stemmed very Quora-like as well. It's that it's solely based on comments. It's not really just content delivery. It's content engagement ultimately.
So let's talk about that. Tell me more about how you think about content engagement and how that has become beneficial to those that are in the group.
Sure. Well, let me start off and back up with just kind of the kind of my thought process when it comes to actually approving things to the queue, within the queue to the group. Ultimately, like on a day-to-day basis, like I'll go in numerous times a day, and there's so many people going in and trying to spam and just lead generation for or generating clicks to different articles and everything. And for me, I made this point that when I started the group, it was one component of it was that I didn't think I was more knowledgeable than other people, and that I could solely dictate what ideas of of each individual's were worth spreading. But so with that kind of thinking in mind, and knowing that a lot of times people are in fact just trying to get links or get clicks through to articles, I pretty much, whenever I'm going through these posts, one of the things I always decide on, and one of the questions that continually comes into my mind is this a discussion? So ultimately, if someone just posts a link to something, it's like, that's not a discussion. I'm sure the article is great, but ultimately for their group, it's not a discussion. Article or links associated with kind of like a thoughtful kind of summarization of somebody's opinion, and potentially some follow-up kind of jumping off talking points and questions to engage the group, that in fact is a discussion. So that's kind of where and it's not self-promotional. It's, hey, potentially somebody could be writing about an article that they did in fact write, but more than anything, it ultimately is someone found an article through, whatever channel, and they're like, oh, I found this, and I kind of want to have a conversation with this specific engaging group, as opposed to maybe in the comment section of that article. And just by virtue of the nature of the group and the fact that TED is, a think tank conference organization based on learning and educating and questioning and having engaging dialogue, that ultimately just replicates itself in an online platform. And the things, it's surprising to me the different scale of things that actually resonate within the group, because I think a long time ago, and I think the discussion may have I think it maybe maxed out of however many comments it had, but it was actually based on what was it? I think the thread was based on poems, like people sharing poems, and so it was interesting because it was it was actually just a lovely thread, and people would just go in and post different poems that they found or that they've written themselves. And with LinkedIn groups, like, you can opt in to actually receiving updates from push notifications as new comments are posted to the group. So at some point it got to people were just like, oh my God, I love this thread so much. It's like I saw that people would comment that on the thread. And this conversation, and it may be up currently, I'd have to double check, but it had tens of thousands of comments and poems and everything. I would never encourage anybody to go to the very beginning, because I think just by virtue of clicking, go to most recent comments would probably take forever. But to have conversations on something like poems, there will also be conversations on very kind of altruistic thoughts. And I actually see that that's actually like a resonating thread within the group. Like, I think there's a component of people like goodwill and giving, and so I think that that really comes through. And then there's also people on very polarizing topics like evolution and God and everything. And I will say, for those types of discussions, I've tried to mitigate those a little bit, just because, and I'm just being completely honest, those are such a headache for me. It's like, because it's one of those things that I think that I don't think that people particularly need to respect one another. I don't think they need to respect each other's opinions, but I do think that they need to have a level of civil discourse. And unfortunately, sometimes there are just those polarizing conversations that, that are just prime opportunities for people trolling the internet, looking to get in fights with people.
Right.
And that really just, it kind of goes against the grain of what the group has created, the community has created amongst itself. So, and I also would like to say that the bad apples or the people that do those types of things are very few and far in between. But I will say the amount of time that I think that I've spent trying to deal with some of those is ridiculous.
I appreciate what you're saying, because you're actually. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, did I answer your question? Actually, sorry, I started going, and I was like, did I get to your point?
No, you did, and I want to dig a little deeper into some of the things that you said, because you're giving us your philosophy on thought leadership, and in a way that you have chosen to lead this group. And so we were just discussing this offline. This idea of TED is full of thought leaders. These are people who, whether through experience or through education or some mix of those things, have a very specific opinion on a given topic. And so these people want to have conversation around that topic, at whatever level is appropriate. And so you happen to lead a group full of these people, actually a lot of these people. And so
a lot of them,
navigating or creating an environment where those conversations can happen is challenging, especially when you have some of the people to consider. So in a very practical way, we were discussing as consultants, we are trying to establish thought leadership in different forms, large forms, small forms, etc. And there's a lot of philosophy and ways to go about doing that. But I think you have given us a very specific take on how to do it. And I think the size of your group is an indicator of how well you're doing. Like, it must be working because you've got people actively engaging in what's going on.
I will say, though, people don't always like it. People don't always, I get emails on a regular basis about people feeling that I'm censoring them in some capacity. And that's actually one of those specific kind of trigger words that I vehemently disagree with because just because, you know, if somebody were to actually post something within the context of what's dictated within the group, it would likely make it through. But the reality is, it's like you can just tell when some people are just, you know, spamming the group and just trying to promote certain agendas and everything. And really, ultimately, it's not there for the point of actually having an engaging conversation. So like that's kind of like the previous notes. My points were really ultimately like how I kind of engaged this group, and I think also what helped is also in the early days and ever since day one of having this group, I have moderated the queue, and my thing is that at a certain point when you've actually been a member of the group for a bit of time, you're able to comment freely, but ultimately not one person, no matter how long you've actually been a part of the group, is actually able to post a new discussion to the group. Every single discussion or every single new discussion topic post, they all go through moderation. So I think also what helped ultimately within the group, and I heard this a lot more in the earlier days, but people were like, oh my God, this group has no spam. Thank you so much. Like, I'm not, we're advertised to, and granted, I come from the marketing and advertising background, but we're advertised to in so many different channels. When you're on LinkedIn, you're advertised to as well. But the reality is within the group, for the most part, I like to think that you're not advertised to. You're just engaging in conversations. You can kind of, hopefully you can let your guard down to a certain extent and not, feel like somebody's trying to promote you and get something out of you. You're there to contribute and engage to this community.
So I'm hearing a couple of themes, and so just kind of, either talk to or refine these themes that I'm picking up. So I'm picking up this idea of moderation, meaning that someone needs to vet or filter the conversation that's happening to keep it healthy. That's the point. I'm also hearing engagement, right? So the idea is that we want to engage in conversation. You use those words often. So there needs to be again some back and forth, right? So if someone's got an agenda and it's a one-way communication, then there's no space for someone to talk back, and then that deadens the conversation. And
honestly,
so
those people just kind of get muted. It's like because at some point the group to a certain extent self-moderates to a certain extent. I mean, of course, there's like the flagging functionality and everything, but generally, there is a component of kind of these tribes that are, friends that have been kind of just virtual friends with these different people and familiar with them, that like if people just kind of clearly are not there for the same goal, ultimately they're not really going to be there for very long. And also just in regards to kind of the thought leadership kind of component and the moderation. So although I moderate the group at like a very high kind of high umbrella in terms of the discussions that get posted, what I do expect for anybody that actually starts a discussion is that they're actually accountable for that discussion, to keep it on target, to keep it moving along, to keep it within the guidelines of whatever. And if something's going on, it's really up to them to reach out to me. But also in that same regard, if I've had a few people reach out to me about issues within a certain thread, the first person I'll actually go to is the person that actually started the thread, and I'll actually reach out to them. It's like, hey, so I'm hearing this, what's going on here, and I'll get their take on what's happening. Because ultimately, like with a group this size, as an individual, I do not have, and also I'd like to mention that this is on a volunteer basis. It's like I don't have the time to moderate every single conversation, every single comment that goes through the group. But the people that have started these discussions, it is their role to stay engaged. And ultimately, it's like if they don't get back to me, or if they're letting kind of these threads go haywire, I do go in and close the discussion.
So now a third theme has just been introduced, which I appreciate. So there's moderation, there's engagement, and now we talk about accountability. That's what you just described. So
you're so good at summarizing my comments.
It's your job. I'm sorry, it's the person's job who posted to then be responsible for keeping the health of their own individual commentary, because you can't do it all. And so I think so those are there more? Let me ask that question. So you gave us three big ideas there. Are there any other big ideas that someone should consider if they're leading a group like this one?
I mean, to a certain extent, it's like, I mean, you got to give people enough rope to do their thing with, but not enough to hang themselves with. So it's like, at the end of the day, it's although there are numerous comments that have come through the group that I don't particularly agree with on a personal level. The reality is, like, I find discourse really engaging, really interesting, and I think there's always a learning opportunity. Whether or not on a factual level you actually potentially know something's actually inaccurate, I think it's just opened the floodgates up to a certain extent for people to learn. It's like just keeping that in mind, I think, throughout it, and just giving people leeway and just giving people the just acknowledging that these are other adults and everything, that it's like at some point, it's like we're not children anymore. It's like let's act like it. And I think when put to the challenge, I think people really rise to it.
So, here's what I'm thinking about, right? And so as a consultant myself, and I've got my own business, and for those who are listening to this, who are consultants or advisors in some way, I'm listening to what you're saying, and for some people, they may take these thoughts and kind of call them second tier. Say, listen, look, I don't lead some big group, and these things are over my head. Well, as I'm listening to you, I hear some very deliberate application. So the idea of moderation, engagement, accountability, flexibility, when we're having meetings with our clients and we're sitting in a group full of 3 people, the idea of moderating, right, of making sure that the right ideas are brought to the forefront still is appropriate. It's important for everybody in the room to be engaged. If it's just 2 people, right, 3 people, everybody's got to feel like they're a part of the conversation that's taking place. Accountability. If someone says something, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm just agreeing with you, absolutely.
Yeah. So if it's just a very small group and someone says something that is out of bounds or contrary or just not necessarily relevant, then we've got to hold them accountable for what it is that they've said, and we've got to be flexible enough. Yeah. For all of us to figure it out.
So I'd say to that specific point too, it's like you hold them accountable, but you also don't. I think what we all fall in danger of, whether it be from a consultant standpoint or even within moderation of a group, is that you don't want to hold people so accountable to the point that nobody wants to say anything. It's
right.
I think we need to give everybody needs like a little a bit of a leash and everything to run with. That it's that you can take accountability for potentially an idea that really scales, to a really great level. You can also, maybe it ends up being like a huge pitfall, and if that's the case too, that's fine as well. But and I also come from I'm very active in the startup community, but it's kind of like learn fast, fail fast, or fail fast, learn fast. But ultimately, it's like it's never really a true failure. You're learning. It's a learning process and everything. I think sometimes people say things out of turn. Sometimes people say things that are maybe inappropriate to, like poor ideas, or, maybe somebody wasn't listening to something and it had already been iterated. And I think we just need to give everybody, I think it's helpful to give people a break every so often. And it's like, I don't think, people don't have to always get in trouble for every single little misstep that they take.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really big deal for those of us who consider ourselves thought leaders, because it is easy to take the opinion of, I am right and you are wrong, right? I'm the thought leader. I'm the guy that wrote the book. So therefore, what I say is correct.
Thought leaders don't think that way, because I think the reason also thought leaders get to that certain point, aside from when you get to a certain elements that are like kind of factual based, I'd like to think that thought leaders also get to that point because they're open to the learning experience. And I think ultimately you don't really become an expert in anything unless you're actively learning and engaging. And I think those people also are well aware that, like, you know, until you've actually figured it out, you make a lot of missteps until you get there.
Absolutely, I agree. You just stole my thunder. You took my point. But that's where I'm headed, right? It's the back and forth that actually builds your authority, your leadership, your knowledge about the given topic. So, Jackie, I appreciate you and your time today. Did we miss anything? Is there anything else that's got to be discussed while we're on the line together?
No, I definitely would say from a group management perspective, and I think that there's very much applications to, you know, just what I've said within numerous different groups. I mean, for bad and good of it, it's all the truth. So. Absolutely.
Yes. So, well, Jackie, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for your time, and just thank you. Thank you much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. And if anybody does have comments, I'd love them to tweet me at Jackie Demanus, JackieDomanus. I'm always happy to hear different takes on this and suggestions.
Absolutely. Will do. I'll include that in the interview. Okay, Jackie. Talk soon.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.